Hi everyone, I'm Scott Stokely and I am here with Pat Govang, and some of you know who Pat is. A lot of people don't. Well, technically there's like almost 8 billion people on planet Earth and almost
Right.
nobody knows who I am or Paul Macbeth is either. But even in disc golf, there's a lot of people that don't know you that I think should, because Pat played a very instrumental part of our sports history. And I don't think it's taken a leap to say our sport would not be where it is today without some very important things you did.
I was a part of.
You were a part of. Yeah, I know. That's what humble people say. That's not what I would say. If you know me, I'd be like, I did it all, everybody. But no, it's you can be humble all you want. I will dispel that myth. So first off, I want to talk just briefly about the PDGA, and I'm going to let you get a lot of talking in.
Sure.
But I want to give some background, because the interesting thing about the PDGA is, things come in waves. But right now it is it's a little polarizing at the moment. People have different opinions about things. Our sport's growing, the direction of the sport, decisions being made. And the one thing I wish that everyone would know is that I think you could probably say the Professional Disc Golf Association is more responsible for our sport being where it is today than any other single thing in the sport.
Yeah.
I think Innova and Discraft financed a lot of it. They were instrumental as well. Ed founded some of it. Wambo played a big part, but the PDGA is like, we wouldn't be here without them. And it's been 97% volunteers. There are people giving themselves time and effort and like not being compensated for it, just wanting to grow our sport. There's been a few big moments in the history of the PDGA. There's been a lot of them. But in the early days, for example, Ted Smethers and Darrell Lynn and some others wrestled the PDGA away from Ed Hedrick. As much as Ed helped our sport become our sport, had Ed remained in control of the sport, we would not be where we are today. It needed to become a players' organization.
Yeah.
Well-intentioned volunteers did a fantastic job to a point, but there was a point where the entire PDGA was a garage full of boxes with player registrations and tournament results and God only knows what. If the boxes were marked with a Sharpie, that was like, that was the organized part of the garage.
What they call keepers.
Those are the keepers. And Becky Powell steps in, and she spent, I believe, a year and a half of her life, 70 hours a week, getting paid what a Taco Bell employee makes, basically reorganizing the PDGA. And then Brian Henniger took the reins from there, and he added a level of organization to to everything. The whole time, a board full of volunteers are smashing at making decisions that affect us today. However, towards the late 90s, I think we were at a difficult point in the sport, would you say?
The growth was starting to outpace the organization.
Yeah, it was. We were no longer just a club of frisbee golfers. We were disc golfers then, but we were starting to like move into these areas of maybe we could start going after real sponsors. Maybe we could have a real pro tour. Maybe we could get on ESPN. Maybe we could evolve past where we were. And the sport and even the people involved were not equipped to do this. I mean, there's a level of experience that our volunteers didn't have. It's not a knock on them. That's just, we wouldn't have existed had they not stepped up and worked hard. But there wasn't anyone in place to take us to that next place. And so when I met Pat, he had started playing.
2000.
Was it really 2000? Okay, so I didn't know you that long. And we used to sit around Denny's, and we traveled together at tournaments, and we would talk about, do we is there something the PDGA can do to grow with this, or should we maybe even talk about another organization that could evolve into something? And I'm just a guy. I'm just a disc golfer. You had a wealth of experience in the real world, organizations, repairing corporations. Like, you came from mainstream business. All right, so that's the most I'm going to talk this whole time. So where were we at and what happened in 1999 where you stepped in?
So it was actually 2000.
Or 2000.
Yeah, 2000 I got in, and at that time I had moved to Detroit in '99, and New Year's Day 2000 I hit my first ace ever playing, and I said, well, I'm going to play more disc golf, and started playing in Michigan, which was a great place to play, and it just so happened the Worlds were being run there that year. So there was a lot of need for volunteers to get involved in the sport, and through that I got to know Mark Ellis, just a phenomenal treasure in the sport. And through working with Mark on putting the Worlds together, he said, hey, we've got an opening spot on the board. We could use somebody like you to come in, and so we after the Worlds.
Well, hold on. Let's start. What was your background? Why did Mark think you were someone that we wanted on the board?
At the time, I had done a number of things, but I was working with Deloitte Consulting, and I was turning around companies that were in troubled financial situations. So I don't know that was specifically why Mark asked me on. Maybe it was so September after the Worlds, which were in August that year, the board voted me on, brought me on, and appointed me as to the open spot on the board as financial director.
Yeah, I think even the financial director role was, like everyone else, a very well-intentioned individual that realized that this was more than the job of financial director was not a job for a volunteer.
Yeah, at that time, the board members of the PDGA were all active volunteers and really actively running it. So they had roles like communications director, oversight director, competition director, and they were supporting, really making the calls and putting that piece together on a volunteer basis. And Brian Honegger, who was phenomenal organization and simply just getting things done, was making it all happen, and he contributed. I don't want to underplay his value and
for sure.
and all of that.
Well, he was the only paid position.
He was the paid
was
position.
The administrator. Like that's where our sport was. Even in 2000, we had one paid position, and it was an underpaid position. I know what they got paid.
So I think the growth of the sport then, as I said, it had outgrown the organization. So the volunteers were burning out in the board positions because there was so much to do. And at that time when I joined, or soon after I joined the board, Mark let me know that the organization had lost its not-for-profit status because it hadn't filed the appropriate paperwork in a few years. And without that, we as the directors were potentially liable for any accident that would happen at a tournament. And
right. So
to me, that sounded like the first thing to get started on. So
right. So join the board, and by the way, now you're liable. You need to do something about this now.
So we reincorporated the PDGA in Chicago as a non-for-profit, and got that structure and got everything basically turned around there.
Okay, so now you're no longer financially liable when someone gets hit in the head with the disc. But where was the sport then? Like it was facing growing pains. What does that mean exactly?
I think we were processing record level of memberships every year. At that time, I want to remember we were on the scale of like 4,000 to 5,000 active members in the organization, and all of those memberships were being processed out of a living room, and people stuffing envelopes, writing names on envelopes, and
licking stamps.
Yeah, and it was all coming out of Canada. So the office was in Toronto at the time too. So that was one of the dynamics of you had to remember to renew your membership and put that extra stamp on the envelope so it got to Canada, which for some members was a challenge.
I don't think half our members know what stamps are.
Right.
Letters. They used to drive. So basically, you gave your letter to somebody on a pony, and they would pass the letter off to someone else on another pony because a pony can only run so long before it needed water. And they went from pony to pony to pony to Toronto.
Right. And I think the growth of the sport at that time, we had the A tier, we had Worlds, and the USDGC had just come on and started in '99, and so things were starting to grow to a point where there was an opportunity to really think about where the organization was going and how the organization could fit into that. And so I worked together with the board and put together, we were able to put together a mission statement that basically said, here's where we want to go. We want to create a competition structure, and within that, we defined what a major was in the organization and created the majors. We created the national tour in there, and then put in more experimental components of that. And to help drive that competition structure, the rating system was there, but it wasn't being widely used. So we worked closely with Chuck Kennedy and Teo Posey and other folks that were on the board at that time, and worked to bring the rating system in and institutionalize it in the sport to help drive the competition structure. And all of this was being driven by the feedback from the members. So to your comments earlier, the PDGA is one of the things that always attracted me to it. It was by the players and for the players. And we took the board really took a great interest in saying, we're doing this for the players. So what's in the best interest of the players moving forward? And a lot of that was listening to what the players wanted. The players wanted more sponsorships in the sport, and they wanted to see more educational programs. So we, on the sponsorship side, the national tour was created to provide an infrastructure to bring in sponsorships and change the relationship between the tournament directors and the folks running the tournaments and the PDGA, and allow a little more collaborative approach to those events, where in the past the PDGA was just the sanctioning body. On the other side of that equation was the what do we do for education, and our, we had an idea of the Disc Golf Foundation, and I worked with John Hauk and Elaine King and J. Gary Dropcho and a great team of folks, and we put together the Disc Golf Foundation to serve as a not-for-profit 501c3 not-for-profit, where we could waive taxes and like on various activities, and provided that to help serve and grow the educational component of the sport.
Yeah, there was no pro tour in 2000.
It was the 8 tiers.
There were 8 tiers.
Yeah.
If you wanted to run a PDGA tournament, you paid, I think, $50 and $1 per entry, or $3 per entry, and then you filled out a report and then agreed to follow the rules. I think that was mostly the extent of it. I think they were just starting to get to a point where organizationally they could say another tournament is 50 miles away that weekend, but that was very logistically hard to even get to. So the only thing resembling a tour was there was 4 series in the country.
Yeah.
John Hauk's Circuit of Skies over Texas, Leonard Muse's NorCal series, Dwayne Utek's Can-Am series, and then the one I left out of my book, sorry, please forgive me, but the Mid-Atlantic series out on the East Coast. And I don't know who was running that. But those are individuals who said, hey, let's put these 10 tournaments in a series and tabulate points. I mean, that was the tour. Is that something you were looking at evolving into, like a tour? I mean, like how did, like, what was the thought process?
Yeah, on the national tour, what we looked at, and we did have the benefit of players coming onto the board at that time. Todd Branch, most notably, and Todd and Dave Felberg and Avery Jenkins at the time were kind of the first popular internet touring crew that were popular with the Winnie crew touring around the country, and that brought in more touring folks. So
let me jump in there.
Yeah.
So 3 of the board members traveled around the country in an RV together. Did that feel like there was a conflict there, or if they get voted in, the members decide, and that's?
Yeah. Well, at the time it was just Todd Branch. So Dave and Avery later became board members at various times throughout the organization.
Okay.
But it was Todd, and I think his perspective that he brought, it was a player for the the players organization, and he did bring that professional touring professional perspective to the board that made sure that we were thinking about one of the things we did with the national tour was make it progressive throughout the country, so you could encourage and minimize the cost and not have somebody play in Maryland one day and then have to drive to Kansas the next day, and then California, and then back to Kansas.
The first attempt at this on a national level.
So we selected big 8-tier events that created that, and anchored, I think it was 12 events in the national tour, and then invited other folks to schedule their 8 tiers and other events around that to help complement that progressive tour nature.
Now, you said you created a 5-point mission statement. Is that the right word?
Yeah, I think that's what we called it.
What was it again?
Well, we focused on competition, education.
Okay.
We wanted to prepare the organization for growth. So one of the things I mentioned earlier, we were kind of struggling and doing things, a lot of hand-by-hand processes. So we worked together. Again, Teo Posey was instrumental in this, and putting together a strategy to put out calls for proposals and get folks say, hey, I'll do fulfillment for the PDGA packages. Like our staff didn't need to be stuffing envelopes with this. We could outsource that. We wanted them thinking more around the involvement of the professional, the competition structure, for example. So we started to think about what could we outsource in the organization to help us prepare for growth, and that infrastructure we put in place has largely remained in place to today. So it's really, it really served its purpose in terms of giving us capacity to grow without overstressing the staff.
Now, did that free the board members up to do more, or did that just free them up so they don't burn out and were able to do less?
I think in the end they did more. I mean, if after we put those steps in place and the various components around that mission plan, and use that to kind of prioritize what we were doing, the new player database started getting worked on, and we brought in folks like Steve Gantz, who he became a legend in the sport in terms of what he's done for us from an IT perspective, and they started working on how we manage the data and how we present the data online, and I think that's that was a huge project through the 2000s.
Well, so that's something that
wouldn't have been possible had we been like struggling to figure out how we pack envelopes.
Right. I mean, that had to be an interesting thing, because people for the rest of the time will never remember a transition from before internet to internet.
Yeah.
Like why would you sign up on a website for the PDGA? It takes like 2 minutes to fill out a form and put it in an envelope.
Right.
And older people probably didn't want to sign up online for a decade. I mean, is that right? Or
we retained a lot of the paper processes for a long time.
I think everyone had to.
Yeah. So like you could do your tournament report online, or you could also file the paper version if you really wanted to.
It's like every time I see a mail truck driving around, I'm like, yeah. It kind of reminds me of that. So, did you create the NTs then?
Yeah, we put together the first national tour and worked with the manufacturers and sponsors. We brought in some other folks to help us think about how we structure sponsorship. So one of the observations I had is the players wanted sponsorships, but if somebody came to the PDGA at that time and said, "Here's $1 million," I don't know that we would have been able. I'm sure we would have figured out how to spend it, but I don't know if we've been able to spend it in a way that would have created value for that sponsor. So we wanted to put those relationships in place and agreements in place that if we were working with the St. Patrick's Classic in California and we had Coca-Cola who wanted to bring in be the title sponsor there, we had the ability to work with the team to make that happen and deliver that. So that was a big part of the NT and getting our great events together. It was a lot of fun working with the TDs on those and kind of just thinking through how do we evolve it and create a role where the PDGA can create value in an event, and that kind of seeded us staffing Worlds and doing a lot of which the crew at the PDGA does so well today.
You had a proposal for the magazine in 2010. That I heard about. What did you propose to PDGA do with the magazine in 2000? Was it 2010-ish?
It was around 2012. They asked me to come back in and help and work with the board to put together another strategic plan. So it was 10 years after. We did it the first time in 2002. And at that time, we did some analyses, and one of the recommendations I made was to discontinue the magazine and start a player network of video content.
You mean like a disc golf network or something like that?
Yeah.
That was proposed in 2012. Maybe
yeah.
Was it just? Is it just too early for that? You think, or
I think it was probably a little too early. Now it's
obvious.
Now it's a vital part of our sport.
So the big thing for, I don't know, well, let's just say forever, as a player was always, how do we get on ESPN? How do we get on CBS? And there's still people that would like to do that, but I think it's a very old-fashioned view.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm sure there's some stand-up comedians whose goal is to get a sitcom on NBC. The vast majority of them are realizing they don't need NBC.
Mm-hmm.
But was that one of the priorities early on, trying to get it? Because back then, before YouTube,
I
that
think
was
probably,
your path.
it was probably more of a pipe dream at that time, because we were much smaller, and our videos at that time were, we would have somebody produce a video of Worlds, and and then we'd run 4,000 VHS tapes of that, and sell those to the membership. That was pretty much the video production. We had a few folks running around and videotaping events, and but there was no real good way to distribute those videos like you have today.
I remember when Blair Paulson first shot World. I love Blair, and I think he did a fantastic job. I don't believe Blair had ever shot or edited a video before. And when he came to the PDGA, says, "Hey, I want to get a couple camera people and video Worlds." Okay, you got the gig.
Yeah.
Because there wasn't a second person trying to videotape Worlds. So, like, the PDGA literally hired somebody who had never professionally done video before, and he did a nice job.
He did a good job.
He
was from within the family.
He was, but the idea that, if he didn't video Worlds wasn't being on video.
Right. Yeah.
Which is wild. By the way, I'll tell you a real fun piece of trivia. So about half the world championships in the 90s got videoed. And complete coincidence, but those are the half of the world championships where I had my best finishes. So if you watch 90s videos and you look back, I'm like on the lead card every single world championships. Like nearly every world championships where it wasn't being filmed, I was on like the chase card or the third card.
Sure.
But it could have easily been the other way around, that I'm not on any world's videos from the 90s just as easily. So I kind of lucked into that one. So the Disc Golf Network, is that something that you've been involved with now, or
yeah, I've had I was lucky enough to be involved with the Disc Golf Pro Tour and working with Steve Dodge, and then was on the board there and remained on the board when we went through the transition and transitioned to Todd and Jeff. So Todd, Jeff, and I are the three board members of the Pro Tour.
And I want to, and that's definitely a separate conversation, because I want to keep this in historically as a PDGA video.
Sure.
But the reason I brought that up was only because the things that happened in the early days of the PDGA, you're able to implement some of these ideas later on as our sports evolved into things like the Disc Golf Pro Tour.
Right, and
which is wonderful.
Yeah, personally, to see the Pro Tours, it served its purpose. At that time there wasn't a financially positive model to put a professional tour together. The PDGA had to invest in that, in the national tour. And last year, with the arrangement of the Disc Golf Pro Tour and the PDGA coming together, with the Pro Tour taking over the professional, the top professional end of the sport, it's just personally interesting to be part of creating that, and to see that life cycle complete itself and evolve into something else.
Well, you're part of the story, and one of the things, I like whenever I've been involved in organizations, especially our organization, is that there's so many people working behind the scenes. The better they do the job, the more invisible they are. Right? Because things just happen. So of course there's a Disc Golf Network now. Of course there's an organized Pro Tour. Of course these events are set up in a certain order. Of course there's a model for sponsorship. Of course there's a rating system. Of course all these things happen. Of course they do, except none of them were, of course. They were all possibly not happening if things didn't go a different direction 20 years ago, right? Not, well...
Or you could say it was a conscious step by a group of people really, thinking about where that's going to go, and taking feedback from the membership and working to enact it in ways that was smart, hopefully smart.
So why did you do it? Because, the amount of... And I am... By the way, I know all the juicy details. I'm privy to exactly what consultants for the PDGA made, and I know exactly how, you were barely paid in the consulting role. Relative to what you would charge on the open market for doing the same job. You could have made a lot more money consulting anywhere else. That doesn't even count the volunteer time that you spent doing it. Why?
It's not how I was raised. So Marty Hapner and I, have this conversation.
Love Marty.
Yes, we were both Boy Scouts growing up, and we were both, our families instilled us with a volunteer ethic of, whether it was in my family we were volunteering at church, or we were running scout troops, or we were, doing anything. We were always involved in helping making it happen, and that, disc golf for me became that outlet. And like I said, Marty and I have shared that story with each other a number of times of how it was just part of our passion, and it was an opportunity to apply some of our skills in an area where we had passion.
So what you're saying is the problem and the fix with America is in the hands of the parents. Like, this got real deep real quick, Pat. No, but because that's the thing. I mean, even now, like, no one's like getting rich doing this. I mean, someday this whole professional disc golf is people are gonna, but like, it's still mostly volunteers, and the people that aren't volunteering, who are being paid, can make more money elsewhere.
Right.
They're still giving. I mean, it's transitioning to where it's become a viable option. I'm not saying, I'm not claiming that people on the tour are underpaid. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that it's still a labor of love.
Yeah, for many, sure.
For many people, yeah. Well, and the fact that people will be able to make money at it, that makes me more money. It makes Gannon Burr more money. It makes everybody makes more money because of people making money. So it's not like a bad thing at all.
Yeah.
But there wasn't any money for 40 years, 50 years. All right. So what do you see? Like, and we won't talk specifically about the pro tour, but disc golf. Well, number one, did you see it becoming this big, or did you see it becoming this big but not this quickly?
Well, I think the last several years have been we became
Insane.
a fad. Yeah, I mean, and I've been involved in skateboarding and owned a skateboard company for a while, and that whole industry is around understanding fads. Skateboarding has gone through a number of them. So the rule of thumb is a fad lasts for about 7 years. So if you look at us historically, before that started, we had enjoyed anywhere between 12 and 15% annual growth year over year.
For 40 years straight.
Which is phenomenal. Like, no other sport has that track record of annual growth year over year. And so I think, when we were recognizing that growth moving forward, we could see what was needed. And, another example of that was, Brian Graham putting together the concept for the International Disc Golf Center. He was working on that down in Georgia, thinking about the PDGA, but not really, more excited about the fact that he could put together a complex of multiple courses. And through those conversations, we knew we needed a U.S. base of operations. As I mentioned, we were in Canada at the time, so the stars aligned, and it was great that he was passionate about making that happen, and we were able to bring the PDGA to the fore. I remember going down to Georgia on a very hot August sticky day in a courtroom where Matlock could have easily walked through the door, and presenting the concept with Brian to the county commissioners at that time to help put it together. But so something like that creates an anchor in the sport around which, it like what the magazine was in the early days. Of course, we're a sport. We have a magazine, and that was a big part of our credibility. Getting the International Disc Golf Center as part of our credibility as a sport was a huge step forward. And Pete May is another one down in Georgia who just got put in the Hall of Fame. It's one of my favorite folks in the sport.
Yes, everyone
was instrumental in making that happen in Augusta as well.
So, I bet you don't know this. You know where Brian Henniger went before he went to Georgia? He came and stayed with me in Colorado. And we looked at locations in around Fort Collins. Right. To build to bring the PDGA to.
Right. Yeah. Our attorney was in Fort Collins, and of course Bill Wright with the Right Life.
I didn't realize that.
just always behind the scenes, one of those behind the scenes folks to make sure that to help the PDGA wherever it could.
Okay, yeah. So that's interesting. Small world. So, where do you see disc golf going? I mean, do you see? No, let me rephrase this. What year do we overtake cricket, and when do we pass soccer?
Well, let's see where our growth rates continue. So, like, I think the last 3 to 4 years have been. I personally think they're an anomaly, and they'll settle down at, in 4 or 5 years and get back to kind of a more, traditional growth. But,
well, the size we are now, then 15% every year from now is epic.
Yeah.
I mean, we'll hit a point of, critical mass in the U.S. Not critical mass, but it's a point of saturation where everybody's heard it, everybody's tried it. Some people don't like it.
Yeah.
But internationally,
it's tough to say where it's all going. But I think we continue to have good problems.
Taking over.
We continue to have good problems. So, getting courses in the ground fast enough, that's a good problem to have. Not being able to make enough frisbees for the demand, that's a good problem to have, versus having way too many frisbees that nobody are buying.
Right, yeah. I remember that. I remember all these days when disc companies went out of business because they didn't make enough money.
Mm-hmm.
So you didn't answer my question. When do we pass cricket and when do we pass soccer? Give me a year. Put it down. I say cricket in 2026,
I have no idea
soccer in 2029.
I'll side with you on that.
26 and 29. You heard it here. Pat Govang says we're passing cricket in 2026. We're passing soccer in 2029. And
globally or in the U.S.? Soccer in the U.S. I think we could probably conceivably take. But
we've already passed.
Globally,
we've already passed.
A tough nut.
We've already passed soccer in the U.S. if you don't count the 7-year-olds.
Yeah.
Participation-wise, we own it. No, I'm saying globally. Oh, if we're talking about cricket, we passed cricket in the U.S. That's already happened. I'm talking about India. I'm talking about cricket. I'm talking about places where they play cricket, the number of players. But no, we're passing soccer 2029. You said so just a minute ago. Do you want me to play it back? So, well, thank you. By the way, we're at Pat's private course in upstate New York. He's trying to come up with the name of his course. He's in the Finger Lakes region, and since we're in New York, I suggested his course be called Middle Finger Disc Golf Course because we're in New York. With plenty of love to my New York. Don't get me wrong, you New Jersey and Philadelphia people have middle fingers too. It's not just New York. But I don't think he's going to go with that one. But we're at your private course up here.
Like Thurgood Marshall said about pornography.
About what?
Like Thurgood Marshall on the Supreme Court said about pornography. I can't define it, but I'll know it. I know it when I see it.
I know it when I see it.
And when I hear the right name, I'll know it when I hear it.
Okay, I'll keep coming up with them.
Thank you.
I'll leave here having named your course. That's my mission. That's my mission statement. Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Scott.
It's been
Thanks for being such a great friend over the years too.
Yeah, you too, man. It's been the best. I wish more people. I try to do a lot of history in the sport. I wish more people would know. Like the fact that everybody doesn't know Becky Powell's name is a tragedy. Like she should be revered for what she did. Yeah. A lot of people would say she saved the organization. Like, how do you not know about this person that saved our organization? So I try to bring those people to the world's attention best I can. Thanks, man. All right, thank you, everybody. And I got Tour Series discs at scottstokely.net. Go buy them. I'll plug them.
They fly further than any other disc.
Oh my God. Just the aerodynamic hot stamp. It's very scientifically engineered. You work at Cornell. The people at Cornell said that my Tour Series discs fly. I'm just digging a hole. I'm going to stop now. Thanks, everyone.